The Dorkening and all affiliated shows are not intended for anyone under the age of 18. The following may contain discussions or scenes that have adult situations, graphic violence, nudity, strong sexual content, and graphic language. This show is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised.
And here we are. We're now live. Welcome to our Indie Creator Spotlight, powered by the Dorkening Podcast Network. We got an awesome show scheduled for you today, and with us, as always, Patrick. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. What people don't realize, I think, is even though this is live, like Leo plays every one of those instruments. That's why we have to kind of cut away to the graphics, because Leo is playing the guitar. He's got the synthesizer out. You can't see that in the studio, but Leo is playing all that music live. It's very impressive.
It's definitely very difficult. And my brother from a different mother, Mr. Phil, how's it going?
Good, Leo. Thanks for having me, and it's good to see everybody here.
Totally. Patrick, would you like to introduce our guests tonight?
Oh, would I? Today we have a couple of gentlemen from the 2020 film The Tent. We are joined by director and actor Kyle Couch. And we are joined by lead actor Tim Kaiser. Gentlemen, how are you this evening?
We're great. I can speak for Tim, I guess. I think he's
Doing
great.
well. Oh, yeah.
So why don't you guys give a brief synopsis of The Tent? And I know we don't want to go too deep into it because there's definitely some twists and turns and everything. Yeah, Kyle, would you like to give a synopsis of what The Tent is?
Yeah, sure. I think, like you said, it's a bit challenging because there are some twists and turns. But I will do my best. Basically, the film revolves around a character named David, played by Tim. And David is kind of a loner. He is the type of guy that has survival skills down to a T. And that's exactly what he's doing. He's surviving out in the wilderness inside a tent. And it's just after the apocalypse has kind of ravaged the earth, if you will. And so he is taken up surviving on his own out in the wilderness. And then in that process, he is discovered by a young girl named Mary. And she kind of gets involved with his life living in this tent. And they don't really agree on a whole lot of things, specifically surviving and how to survive. And pretty much from there, that's where conflict arises is, one person believes in one way of surviving and another person believes in an alternate way. And soon enough, because they came together, they begin start getting hunted by these creatures that may or may not be responsible for the apocalypse. And that's about how much I can share without, giving too much away.
Okay, well, we'll try not to spoil anything. So where did the idea of this come from?
The idea of The Tent really was born out of, I think, multiple different trains of thought. The first one was, I haven't made a feature film yet. So this was kind of an idea to do my feature film debut, if you will. And so, I was looking at a lot of great kind of those first feature films where it's not this huge production, it's not this huge, involved giant cast, something that was very just simple, but yet very personal. And I've always been a fan of simple stories. I think if you break like the movie Jaws down, which is one of my favorite movies, it's a very, at its core, simple story about three guys who are hunting this shark, and that's what we see. But underneath it, there's multiple layers to each character, and that's really what I kind of wanted to achieve here with these two characters, David and Mary. Is you have these two characters surviving, but underneath there's these layers, and so I think that's kind of where the idea was born, was from doing something that's kind of simple on a lower budget, but also telling a story that was really deeply personal.
What was the budget, if you don't mind sharing?
The budget was about a little south of $100,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Does
not look like $100,000 movie. It's
Studio magic.
Exactly.
I was gonna say most of that just went to Tim and his trailer. So
what's that?
I said most of that just went to Tim and his trailer. He's probably got a very extensive writer.
Yeah.
So the first question I have, Tim, because you are a clean-shaven gentleman right now, but the phenomenal beard that you had in the film, was that all you, or was there any applications? Because I'm hoping that was all you.
No, that was all me. That was all me.
Yeah, I
wouldn't know it, but I can grow a pretty good beard. Yeah.
I was getting shades of
Tim. By the way, Tim, you looked like Bruce Dern. By the way, in the movie.
That's what I was just saying.
That's
like I got shades of Bruce Dern in Hateful Eight with the big beard.
I've lost the audio.
You lost.
He lost the audio.
You lost audio. Can you hear me, Tim?
Doesn't sound.
Kyle, you can still hear us, right?
I can hear you guys.
Okay. Maybe if we can get him to hop out and hop back in. Sometimes this happens.
Yeah, if you just restart your browser. Let's see.
Do you have a way to text them, Kyle?
Yeah, I'm going to text them right now.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, while you do that, I'm going to play the trailer. So the movie The Tent is out on VOD right now and actually comes out for pre-order. It comes out if you like physical media. Like, who doesn't love physical media? Comes out at Target rather soon. But here we go. Here is the trailer for The Tent.
Before the crisis, I help people. I help them through tough times, through moments of weakness. If we make it out of this night in one piece, my rule still stands. You're out of here first thing in the morning. So where was I when the crisis began? When things truly got out of control? I was living in a world of comfort, in a long and stilted season of zero growth, zero balance. Now I survive.
And what if there is another way? A better way?
Sometimes we just don't have a choice. The sooner you learn that, the longer you'll survive.
There we go. Tim, can you hear us, sir?
Yeah, I can. I can hear you now.
Awesome. Patrick, you were saying previously.
Yeah, both Phil and I had the same kind of initial reaction when seeing you with the beard. Shades of Bruce Dern from Hateful Eight.
Cool. Seems that when I film, they like me in the beard. Kyle likes the beard. My wife just went upstairs. She doesn't like the beard. But I seem to do quite a few films with the beard. And when I'm not filming, I'll shave it and, go on with life.
I think it really fit the character well, though. Given the circumstances, like
I think it did. Yeah, that was Kyle's creation. We worked together. We met each other 5 years ago. In fact, this week, Kyle works for a nonprofit, Grace Centers of Hope, and I was playing an astronaut at this kind of like vacation Bible school type thing. Kyle heard that I was an actor. We met, and in August we did his first film. I worked with him on a film called The Eulogy. and I had the beard.
Nice. Now, Kyle, when you did the film, as you mentioned earlier, that you had a budget of 100,000, and yet it looked much bigger than 100,000, in my opinion. Did you use that money intentionally to have it as a one location film? I mean, obviously there's other locations in the film, there's flashbacks and all that, but the main feature takes place in a tent. Was the budget used intentionally wisely like that to make it a kind of one place location because of money, or was it just, since I haven't made a film, the amount of effort is required to make a film that goes to multiple locations?
Yeah. So, well, it wasn't quite 100,000. It was south of 100,000, but it was definitely up there. I think when it comes to the budget, the biggest thing is just kind of realizing how much you need to raise before you start shooting. And so for us, it was always the plan to have one location primarily be within the tent. And it's a lot of that budget is utilized for your cast and your crew and the food, and there's things that you don't think about, and that's Nancy, Lynette Parker, our executive producer. She is so good at just coming up with the questions that we wouldn't think to ask, as filmmakers. Like, okay, if we're going to shoot out in the middle of the woods, and you have several women on your set, when you think about guys, right, a bunch of guys going out to the woods to shoot a movie, if you got to go to the bathroom, you just go out in the woods, right? But with women, they're not going to do that, especially, professional women that are working on a film set. And so she says, where's everybody going to go to the bathroom? And then I'm like, okay, well, we'll just get a porta potty. Well, who's going to deliver it way out here? And so it's just okay, if we're going to have food and we want to have warm food because we're shooting in October and it's a little cold out, kind of warm everybody up, how are we going to power all of that? So it's several, logistic issues that go on behind the scenes. And then of course, you want to make sure that everybody's taken care of financially. I think that's the biggest thing is, so when we were shooting the movie, we shot, which I think is just a testament to our cinematographer, Robert Skates, and Nancy, our location / everything, executive producer. She wore many hats, but we shot all the stuff inside the tent on a studio lot, or basically in a studio. And then we shot all the external shots of the tent on location. And so basically we had to divide the days up and do all that stuff. So there was just, when you're shooting out in the woods and it's at nighttime, sometimes 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, you need to invest in things that are going to keep people, one, awake, and then also, just keep people warm and cozy. And then of course, lighting, all the lighting that goes into lighting a virtually pitch black area. So it's what I thought would be kind of that easy, okay, the first kind of feature film, a simple story. It was really not as simple as I thought, basically shooting, outside for a majority of it.
Yeah, you mentioned cinematographer. Some of the best shots in the film were these like shots from straight down. Mm-hmm. Did you guys use drones for that?
Yeah, we did. We used, we actually had several drone shots that didn't make it into the movie. There's so much stuff that just didn't quite make it because, again, when you're editing, you're cutting things out. So yeah, some of those were drone shots, but yeah, anything looking down or real high up. Robert would pull out his drone, or also our editor, David Peterson. He had a drone, so we'd do a couple pickup shots. He would go out and fly his drone out in the middle of the woods and get some shots. So it was kind of a collaborative effort, but initially, yeah, Robert was just you pull out this drone and fly it up in the air, and then we'd all just look at it kind of dumbstruck, like, oh man, this is so cool, just getting these shots. And then you have to, you got 30 minutes on the battery, so you kind of have to refocus yourself, and you're like, this is amazing, but we have work to do. So like, let's get the shots that we need and let's move,
Well, the picture quality on those was certainly amazing, and I know that those can't be too cheap because I priced drones and my wife slapped my hand.
Leo does love his toys.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I just can't buy them all.
So one of the things I thought was really, really cool was when we hear the creatures in the background, and the sound design I thought was very, very interesting. It almost reminded me a bit, if you guys are familiar with Bone Tomahawk, the S. Craig Zoller film, that the sound that the troglodytes made. It was very reminiscent of that, but it was not. It was unique. It was his own thing. It wasn't like you just took that and reused it. So I don't want you to think that's what I'm saying, but that's the closest analog I had for it, is what I'm trying to say. Like, it was very cool. I think that, in a film like this where you're trying to be very atmospheric and mysterious, sound design plays, such a huge part of that atmosphere.
Yeah. Well, we, Mike Primo, he was our sound designer / sound recorder on set. So he was living in the trenches with us. That I think we shot the movie in about 15 days, roughly, after everything, a couple reshoots and whatnot. And he lived in the trenches with us. He stayed out there till 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes, just recording sound and not he didn't complain ever. Mike is just such an awesome guy. And then he also edited the sound, along with his partner. And, man, it was like making the movie all over again, because at that point it's like, okay, what are these things going to sound like? What are these sounds going on inside David's head? And so, Mike to this day still won't tell me what sounds he said he mixed some stuff together. But one thing that I can say, which is kind of interesting, that Mike did tell me, was we recorded some lines that Tim recorded in ADR of his own voice, like kind of yelling or saying negative things. And then Mike was able to actually take some of those things and kind of mush them into the sound effects of the creatures themselves. So actually some of Tim's voice is part of the creatures. It was kind of a little Easter egg that, we didn't know if anybody would notice, and he morphed it enough, but it was just something that we knew creating the movie, that we wanted, some of those sound effects to incorporate some of David's voice. So.
Oh, wow.
So now, Tim, I have a question for you. How's it feel working as an actor, or I should say playing a character that is, I guess, eccentric, a loner, and then becoming, and I guess this isn't a spoiler since we know right away, living as a person in an apocalypse world where there's no generally people around. How was that? Because as an actor and whatnot, I assume that you're most certainly outgoing and have a lot of friends and neighbors and so forth. How was it to pretend you don't, to pretend that you have behavioral health issues and things?
Well, there's I think a weird side to everyone, and truthfully, I love to be alone a lot. I guess I'm somewhat of an eccentric in my own way. I do love people, though. I've got a great family. My wife and I have 12 grandchildren. I've got 3 daughters, a son. And so elements of my whole life, understanding the relationship that I have with Kyle, and when he first proposed doing this film, and pitching the idea and the script, starting to work all that stuff together, my own experiences of loss, and family and relationships, and yet kind of like how I like to be left alone. I mean, you just start mixing this all together. So there's a lot of, without kind of spoiling things, I just brought a lot into the role. And it's kind of like, for me, I just kind of throw a switch or something. And once I totally understand, Kyle, we talked a lot about the direction of the character. And once I kind of understood it and where he wanted to go with it, it's just like, hey, let me go. And if you don't like it, let's do another take. And, once we get into it, it's just like, it's not even myself to some degree,
Yeah, I was going to ask how method did you get on this? Like, did you do like the full Daniel Day-Lewis and like live in the tent, and that bucket was really your bucket, and you were using that and you refused to use anything else, and like you were living in the tent, or was it just getting into the headspace of the character?
Yeah, I think, let me just kind of, before I answer that, just so you understand a little bit of my background, I came into acting 10 years ago. So I've been married for 43 years next month. I was a business guy. I did a little bit of acting in my life when I was 30 years old. And 10 years ago, I just felt a calling to acting. So I started on the ground floor. And I'm saying all that to say, I really never understood a lot. I kind of got the method stuff, and I've almost created my own application to it. So with that being said, I think I like how you kind of phrased it, got into the head of the character. I seem to do that, but yet I don't, I'm not the Daniel Day-Lewis, and I don't like to get, acting's kind of funny. You got to really unzip yourself and let everything kind of hang out. But I kind of want to don't want to lose my marbles in the process, Not to say that a good actor does, but yeah, the method thing, I'm not real, I got a modified method, if I could frame it that way.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Everybody's got their own different style, and I wasn't sure. Like, no, I need to know who this guy is. I am living in this tent in the woods the entire shoot. Call me David. Don't call me Tim. Like, I didn't know how intense you.
No. I mean, I go there. Oh yeah. I mean, it's really funny. I mean, we're getting ready to do a take, and Kyle, we might talk a little bit about it. And it's almost like playing a sporting event, so to speak, where you're breaking out of the huddle, you're coming to the line of scrimmage, and the quarterback's ready to call the play, and you got to execute. And so it's kind of like that. And I just love the part of the acting where you're just like a kid again, and playing army, or just playing a role, and we got you just dig deep into it for me.
Now, you guys said this is filmed in Michigan, and obviously it's filmed in the woods. How far away from civilization were you guys?
I don't know, Tim. Can you answer that?
We were probably, I'd say, 25 miles north of my home. It took me, or maybe it was 30 miles. It took me about a half an hour to get to the set. I'm in Troy, that's north of Detroit, about 20 miles. So probably 50 miles, 45 miles from Detroit downtown. And it was pretty, I was shocked that it was really pretty remote, pretty cool. Nice piece of land.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, when it got dark out at night, it
dark.
Yeah, you definitely, it's, at the end of the shoot day, or night rather, if you will, it's like, okay, let's shut off all the lights and go home. We had to pack everything up. So everybody tries to get out, but everybody's trying to help each other get out. It's not just like, okay, it's your job, cinematographer, we're going home. And so they shut off all the lights, and you're in the middle of the woods, and you're, with your cell phone trying to find the path out. And it gets kind of spooky out there. Like it's not as you don't get as brave when the lights are shut off as you are when everybody's around you. So it feels, I mean, we had to take a dirt road to the location. So, I mean, that tells me one thing already. So yeah, it was out there.
Did that enhance the performance that you got out of the actors, Kyle and Tim? Did that help you, kind of tap into that, primal fear of the dark?
I think it did. I mean, no question about it, especially doing some of the chats around the fires going and just being out in the woods. I mean, when we did some of the chase scenes and things of that nature with the torch, and yeah, I mean, it's like a natural. I mean, you don't want to wander too far from where the lights were. It was pretty dark. It's pretty cool. It was really, for me, a once in a lifetime.
You guys are wimps.
Experience.
Come on.
What's that?
You
Yeah,
guys are
I mean,
wimps, I'm telling you, because as you can see behind me, I got a forest, a deer went by
nice,
earlier today.
nice.
I have roads in my town,
I
dirt roads.
I was
Come
about to
on,
say
you guys
something.
are city boys.
yeah. I mean,
I'm a
I
real
grew up
city
with.
slick,
They're city
so.
boys.
I grew up out in the boonies, and I grew up with two brothers, and I think maybe this might be some of where like my love for weird stories comes from, but they would tell me some of the cheesiest, goofiest stories, but I believe it. And I grew up horrified of Bigfoot or just the creatures out in the woods that you never, you didn't know. And so it's like people ask me questions of like, would you rather go down a bad neighborhood in the middle of a city, or would you rather go down a dirt road in the middle of the night? And I'm like, bad neighborhood in the city all day. Out in the woods, you don't know what's out there. So I've seen enough movies and documentaries on Netflix to know good things don't always happen out in the woods. So
I have to say, I grew up in the boonies as well, but I lived down a dirt road, a long private dirt road, and we always had to go far away for Halloween because we would get no kids for Halloween. Everybody was too scared to come up our road. So it was
Yeah, for us, Leo, we actually have Halloween in the downtown because there is no neighborhoods in my town. So everybody has to go downtown, and they just have a big party on the green. I do have a question though about the movie. Now, Kyle, obviously, this is an apocalypse film. Some big ones recently. It was like A Quiet Place, and various zombie films and whatnot. What made you come up with this idea? Because obviously, apocalypse films aren't necessarily original. Because I just named a handful of genres or subgenres, but yours is somewhat a little different, and I guess distinct for this subgenre of horror films. Where did you come up with that idea, and what made you come up with that idea?
For like setting it in an apocalypse type scenario, is that what you mean?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, having it in the idea of saying, all right, let's have this in the middle of the wilderness in a tent. And obviously, budget reasons, you can't have it in a huge city that's apocalyptic. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of original take on apocalypse film. Where did you come up with that idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think apocalypse films are a genre of their own, right? It's kind of you take movies like one of my favorites was the one with Denzel, Book of Eli, where it's kind of post-apocalyptic. With Denzel Washington, and then other movies like 28 Days Later, and just tons of kind of that post-apocalyptic. The Road, which was based off of the book. I think it's Cormac McCarthy book.
It is Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah, so I think I'm definitely a fan of that idea, but I've always it's funny because we had. We put the trailer out there, and somebody made a comment. They said, "Oh, I bet these guys made this after the quarantine happened." And it's like, no, dude. Like, we actually shot this a little while ago, before all of this quarantine, COVID-19 stuff happened. And so, it's. I think for us and for me, it's hard to, I guess, explain too much without giving it away, but I think ultimately, what does it, what does the apocalypse, mean to these characters? And I think that was kind of the scenario of, making this movie built around that idea, which was, it's we could all experience the apocalypse but we're all going to experience it a different way. And I think that is the main conflict between Mary's character and David's character is, you have Mary's character who's like, the answer is to stick together. And that's how we can survive the apocalypse. And David's answer is you stick to what you know and you stay on your own and you don't involve yourself with other people. And that's how you survive the apocalypse. And they're both surviving. That's the big thing I don't think either one of the characters identifies until later on, is that, they are actually both surviving their own way. And I think that was only an apocalypse can really bring that sense of survival out of somebody. And especially with a film, you kind of have that exaggerated scenario of like what's going to really bring out the layers of a character the most. And I mean, why not the end of the world? So I think that's kind of, roughly where the premise of setting it at the end of the world came from.
Now, one of the things I appreciated, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit by saying that your favorite film is Jaws. And one of the things Jaws is famous for is not really showing the shark. And that was, for a variety of different reasons. But I like in this film, similar to Bird Box, where you don't really get to see an accurate depiction of what the creatures are. I've always been of the opinion in a horror film, especially something like this, where you're inventing a creature. Once you give shape to the creature, I think it lessens its impact. Mm-hmm. No matter how terrifying something is, it's like, oh, well, I know what this is now. Like the xenomorph in Alien is a great example. Like that's one of the most terrifying things you could possibly see, especially because you get to see the whole life cycle of it. But it is what it is. It's not going to change. It's not going to be different. It's essentially going to be the same thing every single time. Leaving that up to someone's imagination. And I know there's like a little, I don't want to call it an Easter egg because it's, it's on the IMDb page, but like a little sketch that you get to see. But not actually, yeah, there we go right there. Not actually getting to see the full detail of the creature. Not, like we get to see through its eyes a little bit, which I thought was pretty cool, but not seeing it leaves that air of mystery. And I think it fits really well with the direction that this film goes in. Was that a specific decision that you made, or were you like, well, we have these concept sketches and let's see how it goes. Maybe we'll, shoot something with the creature, or was it just, we're not showing it at all ever?
I think that is a little bit of both. I agree with you 100%. And I've heard other directors say it, and I can't agree more. Your imagination is going to think up something far more terrifying than what I could conceptualize. And so we definitely had some creature kind of designs from the get-go. And I think as we just progressed further, we just kind of realized that this was David and Mary's story more than anything, and that these creatures were really just a component that brought them together, and kind of, to a degree, attempted to tear them apart. And so I think as we, continued to film and we just really saw kind of this dynamic between the two of them, we really... a huge inspiration was the movie Signs for me. And I think the inspiration was, that movie really until the end, you didn't see any of the creatures. And I can't tell you the last movie I've seen in theaters that scared me that much. I mean, that physically made me jump out of my seat. And they barely showed anything until the end. And so, I think for us, it was a similar scenario where it's like, okay, let's shoot a scene with a creature in it. Okay, here we go. Here's the scene with a creature in it. I think it would be scarier without it. And so that's kind of the route we started to take. And then as we were feeling it out, it really felt like, okay, this is the right direction to take. We're not going to show this thing. And we give glimpses and pieces and the drawings, of course, as you had mentioned, but you really don't get to see it. And for me personally, I think it's just so much cooler to imagine what you think is there versus just straight up showing you, you know.
Exactly. I completely agree. Like there's, there's so many times, I know they tell you in the filmmaking, show, don't tell.
Mhm.
But in this case, like you were saying, like if you're like, okay, it's a like again what they did with Bird Box, like Sandra Bullock's character was going to see like this weird amorphous baby looking thing, and it's like, okay, that's not scary to me whatsoever. Well, he's a giant clown, like that's what the creature is. Well, I'm not scared of clowns. I immediately check out of this movie. But if it's just it's 2 a.m. and I see the pile of clothes by the window that looks like a demon stalking me, like that's what you're seeing. You're seeing like whatever this is. I'm imagining different things than what Phil imagined and what Leo imagined and what Tim imagined. That is something I appreciate. Don't give us everything. Leave some mystery, especially like where you describe the apocalypse, where it's just the crisis. Well, what does that mean? Like, you don't get into it because that's not the focal point of the story. The focal point of the story is how are these people dealing with it? And I really liked the dynamic between the two of them.
Yeah.
Especially where, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say about the crisis when Kyle, when we got together and we had lunch and discussed the possibility of making the film and his idea about it. And he was talking about this crisis. And then I actually, months later, I had the script in my hands and I'm reading this, the crisis. I've never been a horror person. I've never seen apocalyptic films. I could barely say the word when he told me what it was, apocalyptic. And now the oddest thing is we go through this COVID thing, and it's like bingo bango. You get the pandemic feel, the crisis. I told him the other day, I can really play the character now. I know what's happening. The crisis. I thought he was kind of goofy when he's like, oh, the crisis, it's like, what the heck's a crisis,
Well, it doesn't give anything away.
No.
Well, and I think too, like, of course, with the route the story goes, I think it is hard to describe things, without saying too much. But I think, I didn't want to say the apocalypse or the end of the world. I feel like that's been done before. And, I think I definitely wanted to do something different. And so, yeah, I think the crisis is kind of a perfect explanation once we do discover kind of, what caused it and all those things and what went into it. I think it's like, oh, okay. It's there. But in the beginning, yeah, it's very, we play coy quite a bit.
Well, I don't think it has to be overly expositive either, because, it's not really, again, like the focal point for the audience. The characters, like, oh, yeah, it was the crisis. Like, they all know because they lived through it. It's not necessary for us to know what happened. Mm-hmm. Like, it could have been a plague. It could have been a natural disaster. It could have been a coronal mass ejection. Like, who knows? Like, it's just they lived through it. That's all we need to know. Like, that's part of the story. Like, if you would, Terminator Judgment Day, like we know what Judgment Day is because they explained it because it looks cool on the screen. But, if it was a plague, people, dying in hospitals, while dramatic, might not be the best cinema.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think when you're writing something, it's kind of like, okay. And I built a timeline, prior to, okay, what caused the crisis? How did it happen? What went into it and all that stuff. So there was a lot of workshopping. I mean, I sat and stared at a whiteboard, okay, what is the crisis and how did it happen in terms to all this stuff? And I think, that's really where kind of the story started to change into something different. And so, yeah, it was, there was no way to go into it and be like, oh, here's the crisis and here's what it is. And, exactly what you said, it's, you can't do that. It's already happened. These characters are living it. Now we're just injected into their scenario.
I have to say, the emergency broadcast system that you do, that there was kind of freaky, because we're used to hearing this has been a test, but like the actual script for that, did you make that up, or is that something that you found out that is like an actual script if something happens? Or
So are you referring to at the beginning on the radio?
Yep, with Tim on the road there.
Yeah. So no, I mean, it was just basically okay. Here is this scenario. How would it play out in the real world? Would something go over the radio? And then just listening to a few of them, like listening to a few actual kind of things, YouTubing, like, okay, what would this look like? And then just kind of just borrowing different ideas from things that we've seen in real life. Like, I think one of the most scariest things, and actually just happened today, because there's a mask order in Michigan now. It's mandatory. And my phone just blares, in the middle. I've got a 1-year-old and my wife, we're just sitting here. Also, my phone makes this horrifying noise. And I'm like, what the heck is this? And it's, you have to wear a mask now. You have to. And I'm like, that is horrifying. And so I think that's kind of, mixture of like when you get those emergency things on your phone and it lights it up and it just kind of, and it's designed that way to jar you. And I think I kind of wanted to do that. Also, I remember seeing the Silent Hill movie, and there's that scene. I remember seeing it in theaters. I was a kid when I saw this thing, but I just remember it's like right before like the atmosphere changes and all of a sudden these ashes are falling and you hear those old, sirens going on. And then you see, Pyramid Head walking, through. And I just remember like that was horrifying. Like that scared the crap out of me and seriously elevated the movie. Think of the movie as you will, but there's no way that's not creepy and terrifying when those old sirens, like war sirens, go off. And so I think that was kind of the idea. That was where some inspiration came from, was definitely that movie for sure.
Now, since you were talking about sound effects and things of that nature, what about the music? I noticed the music had the typical scary sounds that you would hear in thrillers and things of that nature, but then you had the whimsical music as well, especially when the two lead characters talked. Is it because, as you mentioned, you're a fan of Jaws and whatnot, and Spielberg is well known to do that in a lot of his films with the whimsical music and stuff? Was there any influence why you chose the music from thriller to whimsical and back and forth? It was an interesting choice, I felt.
Yeah, all the above. I think everything you said lines up perfectly. I think Spielberg, he does have that great, kind of balance between the two. And so, yeah, I listened to a bunch of, John Williams type scores and was like, okay, this sounds cool. And Pierre Vachar, our composer, he really likes just watching the movie and kind of feeling it out and designing the composition, and just doing it. And so I threw him some ideas and just kind of what I was thinking in certain parts. And he got it. I mean, he connected to it right away. He knew what I was looking for, and he killed it. He is so talented, and he's worked on some great stuff. And so I was just like, you're going to take my email. Like, this guy is heavy duty, heavy hitter. And, but he really got it. He understood. And actually Tim was the one who, introduced us. And it was just that whimsical feel. I think it was kind of guided by their relationship. We certainly wanted to show, again, everything kind of leaping off of David and Mary. And so when things were light, they got light. When things were dark, they got dark, and, kind of flip-flopping, because I think their interaction as characters definitely, there's a familiarity there in the beginning, and there's like there's a weird feeling between the two characters that it's like, okay, I feel something between these guys, but I'm not sure what it is. I can't pinpoint it. So I really wanted the music to kind of like show that, without, being too on the nose, if you will.
Now, Tim, you mentioned that you started acting late in life.
Yeah.
Where did you? I know a lot of people would like to get into acting. What are some recommendations to somebody maybe later in life that wants to get into acting?
Boy, good question. I can just kind of talk about my own experiences. I was fortunate enough, August of 2010, I signed up to be a movie extra, and that's how it all started. I always kind of had this burning desire in me that I wanted to try film acting. I had no knowledge of it and didn't really understand acting, but started out as an extra, and it's like one thing led to the next, and I ended up 6 months later going to an acting school in Michigan, and did that for about a year and a half, and then just started flooding myself with reading books and studying, and one thing led to the next. I did my first, some of it was just almost happenstance. I was got auditioned and got into a film. I was like a 2-day player in it, and ended up the lead quit. I ended up the lead role. It was my very first film. It's called Believe Again, which is kind of ironic that I feel like almost a message from God. I was really doubting myself and doubting, God, what have you done in my life? I have this desire to act, and now the doors are starting to open, and I didn't even think I could even continue. This is in 2011, by the way, the summer of 2011. And then I do this film, and it's renamed Believe Again. And it's just kind of like for me, a lot of it has been trial and error, and learning and reading and studying acting, and just kind of like seeing what works and what doesn't work.
Now, Tim, if I could follow up on that, you mentioned how you didn't necessarily do method acting and whatnot. You just you act the way you've learned, like as you just mentioned, through books and research and all that. When you did this character here in this film here, The Tent, did you get the entire backstory of your character from Mr. Couch, or did you actually create the backstory yourself, how you wanted to think? In other words, some actors, they get a character, they don't really know anything about the character's background, and then they go home and then they make up a sheet of, okay, this person had a whole family prior to the apocalypse, this person used to play chess, or anything. Did you do something like that, or did you pretty much follow straight through what Kyle said to do?
No, absolutely. I got the script, and then from the script and from my own experiences, I just started to create this character. And if I was a little foggy on something, I'd get with Kyle and we'd discuss something about the character. What could he have been thinking? And then from there, I just took it and just immersed myself into just studying and thinking and meditating. And as I would really kind of memorize and try to like create he had a lot more monologues that we filmed that we never even used just for time. But, just the script allowed me kind of like opening the door of the guy and David and who he is and how he grew up, and I just got into it. And there was a lot of parallels that I found with David and my own life, and certain aspects of it. I mean, obviously I'm not out there in that regard, but I've never been, I don't even like the dark, to be lost in the woods and rambling around the woods. But no, I mean, it's just, I created a character, and if I went too far to the right or left, Kyle would rein me in and discuss. And, when we got to filming, and kind of, that's just how it all played out.
If I could follow about acting. Okay, keep going on, please. Oh, I was going to say, if I could follow up on that point, as a man of faith, which I believe you most likely are, due to you did acting through your church and whatnot. Did you use a lot of that to create this character, trying to survive and have hope and so forth in a world where people are in trouble and in danger all the time?
Well, that's another good question. I mean, I think the character had a sense of faith, but I think where I was coming from is that the character was really almost maybe obsessed about his own survival and just kind of wrapped up in himself. And I think all of us, that was easy for me to tap into. Not that I've ever been a real obsessive guy with me, but I think you can open up some doors in your inner mind and you can go there. But I think there was a big element. Faith was definitely there. I think David was a man. He was a very good man. And I hate to give too much of it away, but there's some good stuff there. I definitely drew from my own family experiences, raising children and having daughters and, grandchildren and just life's experiences. When you, I had a great dad myself, and he used to take us camping, and we had a weird tent. And anyways, just a lot of great life experiences. So I think, though, I guess a lot of people could listen to me and say, well, he kind of is like a method actor. I guess I am, but I'm not deep. Pat, your earlier question about, the greatest method actors, Daniel Day-Lewis, and believe me, if I was ever in his category, I'd be honored, but I kind of like, for my own psychology, I like to just do something more deep and modified, but not so committed where I'm on set, and never break character. It's just, I'm just too goofy of a guy to do that, We love to shoot an intense scene and turn around and laugh about it.
Right.
Well, you did a great job, and I love the arc of your character, where you're a survivalist creating like YouTube videos, trying to show other people how to survive, in your past, and then going from right before the crisis, and then obviously surviving the crisis. So I think that was a great arc. Kyle, for this being your first major picture and already winning a bunch of awards, what's some advice you would give to other filmmakers? Because right now you're hitting it out of the park. I mean, we've talked to people that have made a bunch of movies, and they're getting nowhere near 100K budget. What are some pieces of advice you would give other filmmakers just starting out?
I think the biggest piece of advice is just, and I've heard so many other people say this, and it's so right. You just have to make stuff. These things right here, these phones, you can shoot whatever you want, but you got to shoot it. And I think that's the big thing, is just making stuff, and consistently making stuff. With filmmaking, the biggest challenge, specifically as a director, is typically you can't really practice a whole lot by yourself. You almost have to, make a movie with actors in order to practice that skill or craft. And so I think that's the biggest hurdle that you're going to jump over. And honestly, when I probably almost 10 years ago, actually, started making short films and stuff, I would just ask my friends, hey, you want to be in a movie? We'll have some fun and maybe take it a little seriously. And it was so surprising to me every time, how many of my friends would be like, yeah, let's do it. And then would take it very seriously. And then I'd be like, oh my gosh, my friend Jason is the perfect bad guy. He is so good. Or my friend Jim, he is actually a really good dramatic actor. And, I think once we get past that fear of the camera, we're all, we could do acting if we wanted to. It's just kind of getting over that hump of nervousness. To be good at it, that's a whole nother thing. But, just really not worrying about in the beginning getting, any serious actors or anything like that, just making stuff. That is the biggest piece of advice. And, just loving it. You really, once you get into something that is kind of, like this, where, there is a significant budget, there is, people's livelihoods on the line. Like they're feeding their families with the paychecks that you're giving them. And so everybody's very serious. Once you get to that point, it does get nerve-wracking and a lot of pressure, and you don't want to be wasting people's time. And I think in the beginning you really got to love it, and there still has to be that part of you that going into this is you feel like a little kid that's been giving the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. And there were several times where it's like imposter syndrome, where you're like, should I be here? Should I be telling all these grown adults what to do and like how to do it? And like, here's this cinematographer who's been doing this for 20 years, and he's like a teacher. He teaches other people, and like he's taking direction from me. And there is a lot of that. And I think it's those people who are very professional and really great at what they do. They can sense that childhood love inside of you. Robert, I just specifically remember my meeting with him, the cinematographer, and just like smiling and loving it. And I feel like he could sense that. And it kind of, when you have somebody leading the charge with that kind of mindset, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I remember when we were kids and we wanted to grow up and be this, and we are this, and it kind of reminds you of that. And I think if you don't start there, kind of that funness, the fun of it, then it's really, when it gets tough, when you're out in the woods at 3:00 in the morning and everybody's tired and cold, it can get challenging. So it's the biggest piece of advice is make it, just make stuff and enjoy it while you're doing it. Don't try to win a rat race with filmmaking. Everybody's starts somewhere and ends somewhere. I think the biggest thing is just make it and love what you're doing.
Well,
that's solid advice.
Yeah. So do you do any editing, or did you have somebody else do the editing?
I do edit. I did not edit this movie. I had David Peterson, who has edited several feature films now. He was recommended to me. I think it was Tim.
Yeah, it was me.
Yeah, Tim. Because actually, our AD, our assistant director, had his movie, who he just shot, edited by David as well. So David was actually, he was like going from the tent right into another feature film, and like two completely different kinds of movies. And so he really, that was my first time working with an editor outside myself. So I think there was a little bit of that, like, if I'm being honest, like kind of letting go of that control of editing, and kind of stepping outside yourself and stepping outside the movie that you intended to make and allowing it to be crafted into the movie that it now is. I think that we spent many of days just slowly going through and editing and getting scenes down, and then making mistakes and having to go backwards and redo things and stuff like that. And I mean, I think that's editing can be sometimes brutal, because like Tim mentioned, there was a lot of stuff that was cut out, just for time. We always imagine this to be about 80 minutes. And so, you finish the movie and it's maybe 100 minutes, and okay, now I got to cut out 20 minutes. Where am I going to cut it out? And sometimes you're cutting out stuff that's like, you're like, oh man, that's so awesome. That was an awesome scene. And it's like, but you do want to tell the best story you can in that time. So there's definitely, editing is, David is just a gem to work with.
Final Cut, Premiere, or DaVinci?
He used Adobe Premiere.
Okay.
So,
what's your preference?
I use Final Cut.
Okay.
I use Final Cut Pro at work. So I do video production at work every day, 9 to 5, and shooting my own stuff and doing my own audio and all that stuff. So I use Final Cut.
Nice. Well, we're at the hour mark. You guys have any other questions for our awesome guests?
I just wanted to throw out there that I really liked the radio right before it got cut off by the air raid announcement. The little snippet that was on the radio. I had to play it back a couple of times just to make sure I heard all of it because I don't know if it was intentional, but there was a lot of times where there was conversation that kind of gets muddled, which I thought was a nice touch. But I had to go back and listen to that a couple of times and make some later scenes make a lot more of a connection with the characters. So I just wanted to point out the fact that I really liked that particular touch.
That's cool.
Yeah, there was there was a lot of intentional cutting on certain things with the radio. I'm glad that's actually makes me excited that you picked up on that because there was very specific, we recorded with my friend Tom an entire interview where essentially him and I get into a fight and a conversation. And so we had this probably 2-minute interview that we had to cut. And we were very choosy. And I think the whole movie, there's a lot of hidden symbolism in the set design that's behind the characters. There's a lot of like dialogue and symbolism and the way they talk about certain things when he's discussing like how he traps things. And she asked him, how do you trap the small beast? Have you ever caught one of them? And it's very specific. He's actually talking about several other things. And I don't want to obviously give too much away, but I know my wife, when she watched it a second time, she was like, oh, does this mean this? And then I would explain it to her and she'd be like, oh my gosh, that's like, that lines up with that. And there's a lot of scripture references with the Bible. So it's with the characters' names and with, just certain scenarios. And I can't get into too much, but there's a lot of hidden, that was a lot of kind of research and stuff that went into like the dialogue and what it means, so to speak.
Yeah, because there was stuff that stuck out. It was like, that's kind of weird. And it's like, it didn't feel like disjointed, but it's like, it feels... I'm trying not to use a word that makes it seem like I'm being derogatory towards it because it makes sense. And, when you watch the whole film, you can see how deliberate everything was. But it's like, oh, this kind of seems a little like jagged almost. Like it's not a smoothly polished thing that happened. Maybe it's a line of dialogue or it's just, something that happened. It's like, that just seems weird. And then when you get through the whole film, you're like, that's exactly the way it was supposed to be done. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I get that.
Yeah, it was definitely, this is probably the deepest I can say something without giving anything away. The biggest thing was to put the viewer in David's shoes, the whole movie. And so there are callbacks, to all that stuff. So I think that's probably the most I can say is that we really wanted to put the viewers in David's shoes.
Yeah, it was definitely good storytelling.
Yeah, my last question, and it's to you, Tim. How does it feel to have to be the person to carry an entire film on your shoulders? Of course, you had a co-star and other characters that popped in here and there, but this was your film as an actor. Is that stressful to do that? Because your performance was fantastic and you did a really good job. So I'm wondering if that was just natural for you, or did you really have to psych yourself up not to like, oh my God, it's just me. Am I going to screw this up? I'm really curious about that.
Phil, thanks for asking me that question. It's a tough one for me to answer because part of me, the competitive person that kind of like how God wired me, I have been looking for this type of an opportunity. So when Kyle approached me with the script, the idea, the concept, we started working together on the project, kind of almost as real intimately as a team, but yet just allowing a lot. I knew that there was going to be a lot on my shoulders. And so I don't know, it's, you hit on something that's going to kind of it hits with me, the do or die. It's like, I played a lot of sports. It's like going to the line and trying to hit a shot, or, swinging at a ball and missing, or I've had a couple of sleepless nights. Like, if this thing doesn't come off, it could be bad. So I'm totally blown away that you said what you said, that you liked it. You thought the performance was good. And I mean it. I'm really, I'm just blown away with that, because I didn't think I could do it. So with the grace of God, I pulled it off, It
I
could
agree
be my
with
best
you.
and last film. I hope I do another one. Kyle and I have another idea that we're working on. We've grown a partnership between us, and kind of odd. I'm like, we're like father and son as a filmmaker, so it's been kind of a real honor, and I love him dearly. The son that I've got a very creative natural son, and he's a creative adoptive son, so to speak, in my heart. So it's been fun.
Nice. We see that a lot with a lot of indie productions. Is you get a successful indie movie, and they sort of develop like a family, and you see the same people working together on project after project after project,
Yeah.
and just going through life, just making awesome movies.
Yeah,
Good,
well,
Tim.
Tim's definitely, he will never say this, but Tim is a huge joy to work with. And he really, I mean, we rehearsed so much, and Tim was just like, I'm all yours. And I've had actors say that before, and it's like, okay. And then you call them, and it's like, well, I'm actually busy for the next 3 weeks. And it's like, okay, I guess you're not all mine, and Tim literally did that. Tim was like, whenever you need me, however you need me, let's work through this together. And, I haven't had that often, really, if ever. And so Tim made it easy to really kind of sculpt this character and develop this character.
If I could add this too, seeing that we're patting each other on the back, interesting enough, once we kind of like shot most of the film, we got, and it was actually in the editing process. I coincidentally had the beard, or wait, I think I just shaved the beard. And that's when Kyle had this idea. He goes, we need a thread to tie this together. And he had birthed the flashback scenes, wasn't even in the original script. And it worked perfect. I go, well, Kyle, I just shaved. I looked obviously like this, and we made some other modifications, but I've got gray hair, so we put a little color in my hair, and the rest is history. But yeah, that was really brilliant. When I saw that tied into the film, I had no real knowledge of what he was doing. So I think that the trust that he and I developed was really cool. And the idea, I thought, was off the charts, and it worked. I mean, it was really, when I just couldn't believe how naturally it looked, the flashback stuff. So
yeah, definitely tied everything together. My brain totally fried right there. I apologize. So this is out on VOD right now, everywhere where VOD can be found, and you also have it coming out on physical media as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, so you can actually you can buy it right now on Amazon on Blu-ray and DVD. So I got my copy coming very soon. It's weird having to buy your own movie. I'm sure we could have, but I wanted to support, and so that'll be fun. And yeah, so you can buy it right now on Amazon, physical DVD and Blu-ray, and then yeah, it's available on Google Play, Amazon. To rent, iTunes, yep, YouTube, you can rent it on YouTube, Vimeo, on demand, and then also it's coming with select like cable providers, video on demand as well.
Nice.
Excellent.
Well, we'll do to wrap up. We'll start with Tim. If you want to maybe go over where you like people to follow you on social media, and just anything you have coming up in the near future.
I'm not too big on social media. I'm on Facebook. You can look me up. I'm pretty friendly, and I look at the tent page quite a bit, and that's on Facebook as well. And Kyle and I got another idea that we're working on, but other than that, it's probably one of the first times in my life after the pandemic. I almost feel like I'm retired from acting. It seems like there was always something that I was doing, and I guess we need time to now promote the tent, and so I've got the time to do that.
Now is definitely the time to do it. And what about you, Kyle?
I am actually not on Facebook. But the tent is. I'm not as friendly as Tim is on Facebook. No, I'm kidding. I just don't have a Facebook. But the tent sure does, and it is the Tent Movie. And then also the tent has an Instagram page. I think that's also the Tent Movie. And then we have a website that is www.survivethetent.com. So there's actually a bunch of really cool Easter eggs. And we kind of did this whole Facebook campaign on Facebook for the tent, probably I would say about a year ago, where we were kind of alluding that the apocalypse was coming and you better watch out. And it was all kind of leading up to the trailer premiere. And so if you backtrack, you can kind of see all those little Easter eggs and clues. And there's a thing on the website where you can investigate David's desk inside the tent. And so you can actually click on things and pull it apart. And there's a screwdriver with his name on it. There's all sorts of little Easter eggs from the movie. So there was actually a lot of work that went into the website. We kind of wanted to, design this whole little world online behind the tent. So that's survivethetent.com. And as far as things Tim had mentioned, we're working on something right now that is going to be sure to blow your minds. Hopefully. And it's a different genre, but it's definitely something that is gonna hit something from the left field that we think is gonna be unique and new.
Very cool. Well, definitely keep us in mind when you're ready to start talking about that. Yeah. And so what you're saying is you were warning people of the apocalypse before 2020. Before it was in,
which is just a weird coincidence. We promised we had nothing to do with COVID-19. We were warning people of actually for us, it happened on Christmas. So that's when we released this, oh my gosh, the apocalypse is coming. And then the apocalypse almost did come. And
that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
So there's a bunch of stuff. We were trying to warn you guys, and now we're here, and we hope that we're all surviving.
We are. We're doing our best. Going out to the grocery store, though, feels a little bit like Walking Dead, so it's,
Right.
Yeah. Mr. Phil, how about you, sir?
Oh, right. Well, yes, I'm guesting tonight here, but you can find me on Facebook. You can find our group, Dark Discussions Podcast, on Facebook. You can go to www.darkdiscussions.com for the podcast, and you can find the podcast wherever podcasts are found.
Cool. You got any specials coming up soon?
Well, we just did a couple of episodes on LGBTQ month last for June, so I finished those two and was able to talk to one of the directors on Twitter. That was kind of cool. But we're doing our 450th episode, should be out in about 5 weeks from now. So
nice.
Oh, great.
Sir Patsy.
For me, easiest thing is throwdownthursdaypodcast.com. You can find all the all the episodes there for not only Throwdown Thursday, but also my secondary show, Shark Bites. I have a great interview with Paulina Nguyen that'll be dropping this week. We are going to be on Throwdown Thursday. We're going to be covering the web series Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. We're going to be kind of breaking that down, all the different characters and how they sort of fit together. And if you've never seen it, it's really bizarre. It's really weird. I love it. I've seen it about 40 times because the whole thing's only about half an hour. But I definitely recommend it. Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. There's 5 or 6 parts, and it's out there. And that's what we're doing this week. Next week, we will be, because it's everyone's been watching it, we're going to be covering Alexander Hamilton. We're going to be discussing the because we've been really delving into the historical figures, and we're going to talk about how he's portrayed in the play and how he's portrayed, how, you know, the real life stuff that they didn't get a chance to get into. So look forward to that. And you can also check out some of the articles that I write over on womeninhorror.net. I have a review of The Last of Us Part 2, and one should be going up this week for an interview I did with Scott Sanford, who is the writer of the upcoming film Axe to Grind, which features Stormy Daniels. And it is not an adult film.
Okay. And for me, just Google Leo Pond. You'll find a bunch of stuff. Could be true, could be not. I'm not going to say which is which, but more importantly, head on over to thedorkening.com, where you can find all the shows on the network. And this week, we're going to be doing, let's see, Wicked Horror Show tomorrow. I need to figure out who the guest is. But we got too much going on. Wednesday, we're going to be talking with R.W. Martin about his new book, Life Inside My Head. So we'll be doing that on Wednesday. There is no Still Token with this week. The guys are on vacation, or they just ran away and not told me where they went anyway. But check out the show notes down below or up above, depending on where you're watching or listening to us, to check out our awesome guests here. And we'll catch you guys later. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you.